So for about 4 decades, the age when someone buys their first home in America basically didn't change. Back in 1981, it was 29. And then through everything, the 80s, the 90s, the dot-com craze, the housing bubble, and the whole recovery after that, it just kind of floated between 31 and 33. Seriously, think about that. 4 decades of economic madness, policy shifts, entire generations coming and going through the workforce, and that number just refused to budge. It was like there was some invisible ceiling right around 33 that nobody could push through. And then, in roughly 4 years, it shot up to 40. That's a 7-year jump in what's basically a blink. And the way the deputy chief economist at NAR described it, the first-time buyer has basically been shoved out of the market, stuck in this gridlock where the whole traditional path to owning a home just stopped working. So the obvious question is, what the hell happened in those few years to blow that number up so fast? Well, the answer is just math. And it's not even complicated math. Between 2019 and 2024, home values climbed about 30% in real, inflation-adjusted terms. Meanwhile, incomes for households under 40 went up 9%. So prices were moving roughly 3 times faster than the paychecks of the exact people trying to buy. Pew's analysis shows the price-to-income ratio for those under 40 households jumped from 2.9 to 3.5 in just 5 years, which means it now takes 3.5 times a young household's entire annual income to buy a typical home. And to put that in perspective, the only other time that ratio was this high was during the mid-2000s housing bubble. So we're right back at bubble-era math, except without the bubble-era lending that at least gave people a way through the door, for better or worse. But take that ratio and turn it into what you'd actually pay every month, and it looks like this. In 2019, the typical monthly cost of owning a home for a young household was about $1,689. By 2024, that number hit $2,776. That's an extra $1,100 a month, every single month. And honestly, I keep thinking about what that number actually means when you sit down at the kitchen table with your bills. That's the difference between actually putting something into savings and putting everything on a credit card. That's a family staring at their budget and realizing the goalpost is moving faster than they can run. You get a raise, you pick up a side job, you cut your expenses down to nothing, and by the time you've closed the gap has already gotten wider again. Now, if the gap is this wide, you'd think the market would fix itself, right? More homes get built, more people sell, prices come down. So why isn't that happening? Because the whole system is trapped in a loop that just keeps feeding itself. Start with mortgage rates. In 2019, the average rate was about 3.9%. By 2024, it was 6.7%. That near doubling created something nobody planned for. It basically locked tens of millions of existing homeowners in place. If you bought or refinanced at 3%, selling your house means giving up that rate and taking on a payment that could be 50 or 60% higher on the exact same house. So people just don't move. The median seller tenure hit 11 years, which is an all-time high. People are staying in their homes longer than at any point on record, and that chokes everything below it. Fewer people selling means fewer homes available, and the ones that do show up get bid through the roof. And the homes that vanish first are the affordable ones, the starter homes that first-time buyers actually need. Michael Fratantoni, the chief economist at the Mortgage Bankers Association, put it like this. You've got roughly 50 million people between 30 and 40 in their peak buying years, and we've been underbuilding by a lot. And since the Great Recession, builders have shifted away from starter homes toward higher-priced, higher-profit construction, according to industry observers. On top of that, agents working in the market say the traditional move-up ladder, where you buy a starter home, build some equity, then trade up, has largely stopped functioning. And what makes that frozen ladder so cruel? It traps everyone. The couple who bought a 2-bedroom starter home a decade ago and now has 3 kids can't move up because the bigger house costs more and their old rate is gone. So they stay put, which means the starter home they'd normally free up never hits the market. Every rung of the ladder is quietly holding on to the rung below it, and the whole thing just seizes. So you might be thinking, okay, but this has to break eventually, right? Market's correct, that's what they do. But if you're sitting around waiting for the right time, the spiral means the right time might never show up on its own, because the very system that could create more inventory is frozen solid. The owners who'd sell you a home can't afford to move. The builders who'd build you a home aren't building for your price point. And every year you wait, the clock is ticking on something you can't get back. So if first-time buyers have been basically cut in half, who's actually buying these houses? And what does getting shut out really cost you? Out of every 5 homes sold in America right now, first-time buyers barely get 1. The first-time buyer share has dropped to 21%, which is a record low. Before 2008, it averaged around 40%. 2 out of 5 became 1 out of 5. That's a door closing on an entire generation. And the people walking through it instead are repeat buyers and cash buyers, many of them decades older, coming in with offers that a young family carrying a mortgage just can't compete with. And think about what that competition actually feels like from the other side of the table. You're a young family, you've saved for years, you finally find a place you love, and you put in an offer with a mortgage attached, which means an appraisal, an inspection, a lender who needs weeks to sign off. Then someone walks in with an all-cash offer that closes in 10 days and asks no questions. To a seller, that's not even a close call. You lost because the deck was stacked before you sat down. And that's worth understanding because it tells you exactly what you're up against. And according to NAR estimates, if you assume roughly 5% annual appreciation, and that figure varies a lot depending on the market, a buyer who waits 10 years gives up approximately $150,000 in equity. $150,000. That's a down payment on your next home. That's a kid's college fund. That's a retirement cushion. That's a layer of security that, once the decade is gone, you can never get back. Waiting has a price, and the price is enormous. The NAR's deputy chief economist said it plainly. We're looking at a generational wealth restriction. Not a generational inconvenience. Not a generational frustration. A generational wealth restriction. The people getting locked out are missing a house, and with it, the single largest wealth building tool most American families have ever had access to. And the thing about housing wealth is that it compounds quietly in the background, whether you're paying attention or not. Every mortgage payment chips a little off what you owe and adds a little to what you own. And over 30 years, that slow drip turns into the biggest asset most families will ever hold. Renters don't get that. They pay every month too, but at the end of it, they own nothing. The money just evaporates into someone else's equity. So when we talk about a generation getting locked out, we're not talking about a delay. We're talking about people falling permanently behind on a clock that only runs in one direction. So is the door actually shut, or is there something you can do about it? And honestly, digging into the numbers made me angry. Not at the housing market, but at the information failure around it. 70% of renters under 40 say the reason they're renting is they can't afford a down payment. That's the barrier. Not the monthly mortgage, not the credit score, the down payment. And there's a real risk of a self-perpetuating cycle here, because the constant drumbeat of housing is unaffordable might actually be scaring away people who could qualify to buy. You hear it enough times, you can't afford it, you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And eventually, you just stop looking. But according to Rob Crane, CEO of Down Payment Resource, 80% of borrowers using FHA mortgages are eligible for down payment assistance. 80%. And only 15% actually get it. There are roughly 2,200 down payment assistance programs across the country, according to Crane, and the vast majority of people who qualify have absolutely no idea these programs exist. Even a lot of real estate agents don't know about them, according to Crane. And I think part of why this stays invisible is that nobody really has an incentive to shout about it. These programs don't run flashy ad campaigns. They're scattered across state agencies, city housing offices, and nonprofit lenders. And half of them have websites that look like they were built in 2003. So the information exists, but it's buried under bureaucracy and bad design instead of being handed to you the moment you start looking. If you want to find these programs, you almost have to go digging on purpose, and most people don't even know there's anything worth digging for. Now, you might ask me, if these programs are real, why isn't everyone using them? And that's exactly the point. The barrier is that most people who qualify don't even know these programs are there. The whole system of help exists, it's just invisible to the people who are drowning without it. And that's what makes this doom loop so brutal. The hopelessness itself becomes the wall. You assume the door is locked, so you never bother checking if someone left a key under the mat. Your own discouragement might actually be the thing stopping you, not your bank account. Alright, so what should you actually do right now if you're a first-time buyer? Let me tell you a story. Felipe and Emma Noriega, he's 28, she's 27, just bought a home in South Jordan, Utah for roughly $800,000. They put down 7%, not 20, 7. In a state that ranks among the least affordable in the country. And they're more than a decade younger than the current median first-time buyer. Emma put it simply, We've been saving for a hot minute. And that line captures something real, the sacrifice behind the breakthrough. It was not easy, nobody's pretending otherwise, but they did it. And they did it without the 20% down payment that most people assume you need. So here's what the data actually backs up. First, go look up down payment assistance in your state. According to Down Payment Resource, every state has programs, and you might be one of that 80% who qualifies and just doesn't know it. Second, learn what the real minimum down payments are. FHA loans require 3.5% down, and VA and USDA loans can require 0. These aren't obscure loopholes, they're mainstream federal programs that millions of buyers use. Third, and this is something one buyer's agent organization president pointed out, half of all homes sell for less than the median. That scary headline number, the one that makes you feel like everything is impossible, it might actually be scarier than the real range of options in your market, so search below it. Fourth, agents suggest looking at condos, townhouses, or fixer-uppers, though in today's market, that first home might be your home for a long time since the move-up ladder is largely stalled. So buy something you can actually live with. Some buyers are also trying strategies like house hacking or co-buying, though those come with their own complications. And financial advisors generally recommend staying in a home for at least 3 years, because the cost of buying and selling can otherwise eat up whatever appreciation you've gained. On the bigger picture, economists say the real fix means building more homes, especially entry-level ones. But that's a systemic problem. It's not a lever you can pull from your kitchen table. And I want to be straight with you about the tension here. These tools are real and they do work. The Noriegas are living proof. But they don't erase the structural crisis we just spent this whole video laying out. If you use them, you're paddling against a current, and that current is very real. But paddling is better than drowning. And honestly, some of the drowning is just caused by not knowing there's a paddle in the first place. The door to homeownership is harder to open than it's been for any previous generation. That's the truth, and nothing I say changes it. But for millions of people, it's not locked. The key is information. Knowing about assistance programs you had no idea existed, about down payments that are a fraction of what you assumed, about price ranges that are way below the terrifying headline number. The crisis is real, but so are the tools, and now you know where they are.